excited to be here. I love project management. Sounds silly, right? I heard that there was a really good opening yesterday by one of my peers over there at the sponsor table, right? I believe he asked, who here eats food? Right? Right. So who here does projects? Good answer, good answer. Yeah, I'll do. So we're going to talk about that. And I think having the tie between the work that you all do on a daily basis and the importance of project management, we're seeing that importance grow and grow and grow. And there were a lot of things that came up in the panel that were fantastic that I'm going to pull out because they mentioned a lot of my key buzzwords that I use in project management, so I see that strong correlation there. So a little bit about me to get started. My name is Belinda Goodrich. I do hold the Project Management Institute credentials. Like I say, project management is my thing. I absolutely love it. We're going to talk about the credentials a little bit later in the program. But I want to give you some background to how I ended up with the alphabet soup that I have. I was raised by parents who own their own business, small town in Maine. And if any of you have been involved in a small business or a family business, you know that it's 24/7, right? You're never not working. You're always getting things done. There's always something to do. So I believe that project management was just in my blood because of that, right? We always were looking at how do we grow the business? How do we diversify? How do we compete? Especially in an area of Maine that wasn't really economically sound. So how do you offer a viable business solution that people can afford? So that was where I started to get my roots. Well, how many of you have been to Maine? Couple people. Anybody from Maine? No.
Cape Elizabeth, south of Portland.
Oh, I love this. Okay, so this is a thing, and maybe you can validate me on this one. Mainers, we don't see Mainers outside of their natural habitat very often, unless you're in Orlando, right? Typically.
Yeah, my dad moved to Orlando last year.
See? So it's always so cool when I find someone from Maine. We were in Ireland recently, and we actually ran into 3 different couples from Maine in Ireland. I'm like, that's more than I've bumped into in the rest of the United States. But so Maine gets cold. It gets really cold. And there was one winter, 1996. It was a horrible winter, and I had electric heat. And electric heat in Maine in the winter, not good. So I'm out getting the firewood, gathering it, bringing it in, starting the wood stove. And finally I said, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm so done with Maine. I'm so done with the winter. I can't handle it. I was a single mom. I had 3 little girls looking at me. And I said, you know what? We're out of here. So being the natural project manager that I was, even though I didn't know it at the time, I planned out my route. I went to AAA. That was back when they had the triptychs. Does anybody in my generation might remember this? Yeah. So they actually gave you triptychs. You would go in and you would tell them where you wanted to go. And they'd give you these little spiral-bound booklets. And it would give you the turn-by-turn directions. So I planned out my gas mileage. I loaded up my belongings in a little U-Haul wagon, attached it to a Ford Escort. And off I went with my 3 little girls in the back. We set out for a new life in Arizona. What I didn't account for was the fact that when you put a U-Haul wagon on a Ford Escort, it kind of drains your gas mileage, just a bit. So here I had it so perfectly calculated. I was so proud of myself. And I realized, boy, I'm going to need to be putting a lot more money out. So I'm like, okay, girls, we're eating crackers. You can have a bottle of water, one, because I don't want to stop a lot for potty breaks. They knew when we stopped for gas, I got their potty break. And then we were back on the road because I didn't want to be on the road when it was dark out with 3 little girls. So I had it very strategically planned. Again, project manager. So we made it out a little tighter on cash than we anticipated. So then I needed to get a job. I had always worked. I had always had my own I had my own business for the last 9 years before I moved out here. Well, Maine and Arizona, very different. People in Maine knew me. In Maine, we all pretty much know each other. And if you don't, you know someone who does know that person. We were all connected. In Phoenix, they looked at me like I was nuts. I'm like, hey, let me do some medical consulting for you. And they're like, who are you? And why do you talk so funny? So I went to Olson Temporary Services. I remember Olson. I don't know if they're still around, right? Olson Temporary. Gave them my skill set. Here's what I do. Here's what I can offer. And they said, oh, Belinda, we have a job for you. Make it a good one and make it good pay. I got 3 little girls looking at me. Well, we have a client. He's the chief engineer for law engineering. And they're looking for a high-performance executive assistant. I'm like, okay, I got this. I can do this. She goes, there's something I should tell you, though, about this job. Okay. She goes, we've put 7 other people in the past 15 days. She said, you mentioned on our interview that you liked a challenge. How about that? And I said, you know what? Sure, let me try it. So I got in, started working for the chief engineer, wonderful man. That's why the panel was resonating with me. I'm like, oh yes, I know those days. I remember all of this. And what I found, the reason they had so much turnover in his executive assistants was not because he was a bad guy to work for. It was because their business had some struggles. They weren't competitive. They were wallowing. They weren't growing. They were doing RFPs, requests for proposals. They were responding to them, but then they couldn't deliver the services that they had offered. They didn't have enough staff. They didn't want to hire staff until they got the jobs. They couldn't get the jobs till they hired the staff, right? And so here was that big crevasse that we had to figure out. So I started putting together some thoughts, because when you're from Maine, you speak your mind. And I'm like, well, here's what I'm observing. Well, that shocked them all, because previously the existence didn't do that. So I helped them get some jobs. I helped them work through. I built some project management for them. And then I said, okay, well, you guys are pretty good. I'm off to my next challenge. So I went on from there. Wonderful company, great experience. So I went from there to a couple of other firms, ended up at Charles Schwab as their director of project management, and then decided to retire 12 years ago and start this company, which is my passion. And it's helping people understand the correlation between project management, getting things done, and business and how we need to grow. You all sit in a very pivotal position for that. You see it 2 ways, most likely, and you guys can agree or disagree with me on this. I want to hear your thoughts. One is you're dealing with change with your executive, right? Organizational changes, right, that you have a key part in, if not a key hand in, at least kind of trying to keep everybody on the same page. But then you also have project managers potentially within your organization that need your executive as well, right, and that are trying to tap into your executive's time. And we heard a lot during the panel about managing the calendar and the time, right? So I want you to understand project management both from your role in it if you're a direct participant, but then also from an organizational perspective. So when you do have those project managers saying, hey, I need some time with your executive, what do we need to know about that and how do we do that? Okay, so that's going to be our goal today. So I'm going to try to give you some quick hits, some good solutions here for seamless project management. I am open after for any type of dialogue or follow-up questions. Like I say, this is something I love and completely believe in. So I always welcome group participation and lots of questions. So we do have time saved at the end for that. And we're going to try to keep this moving along. All right, so what we're going to talk about is, first of all, what is it? So we're going to define project management. And why does it matter? Now this question, why does it matter, has evolved dramatically over the past 10 years. And we're going to talk about why that has and why this is so important to your organization. We're going to talk about the triple constraint. There's actually 4 of them, but they call it the triple constraint. So we're going to walk through that, and then we're going to go beyond the triple constraint and talk a little bit more about strategic. One of the terms I heard this morning, I made notes as you guys were doing the panel because I thought it was fantastic. Strategic business partner. I heard strategic business partner is a term, a phrase that's being used for your role, and I 100% agree with that, being able to see the strategy of the organization. So we're going to talk beyond that triple constraint to understand that strategic tie. And then I want to talk about the fact that you guys are rock stars, and you got to step into that rock star. You got to own that rock star. You are so powerful in the role that you play. And sometimes we think we get a little bit caught up in our title more than we understand the role and the importance of our role. And so I want to talk about that, some leadership. And that's why we'll mention some of the credentials and certification if that's of interest to you. I'm a big believer, obviously, in certifications. Not for everybody. Some people are like, no, I'm good without it. Other people are like, I need to know more. I am encouraged that 45% of you said you were potentially interested, so that's good. Happy to talk to you about that. All right. So what it is and why it matters. So there is an organization called the Project Management Institute, PMI. They've been around since 1969. Nonprofit organization. Their goal, their objective is to create common terminology, common vernacular, best practices around project management. Every couple of years they release something called a PMBOK guide, a guide to the project management body of knowledge. I am such a project management geek and such an avid book hoarder that I actually have every PMBOK guide they've ever created. Starting from before it was even a PMBOK guide, it was white papers, and then it became a little tiny white, like little book. It was really pretty, it was like this. And then it got a little bit bigger a couple years later, and then a little bit bigger, and now we're on 6th edition. If you ever have problems sleeping, buy a copy of that sucker, crack it open, guaranteed you'll be out just like that. It's not a very exciting read, but I think it's amazing. There's so much good stuff in there. So according to the Project Management Institute, their definition of a project is a temporary endeavor that's undertaken to create a unique product, service, result, or update. Okay, so something that's happening that's temporary, has a defined start and an end, and it's creating something unique. When we used to think about projects way back when, we thought like main big projects, construction was really the roots of project management was in construction. So big development projects like that. Military, so a lot of what we get in project management today has its roots and origins in military operations, building warships, for example. Then we started to see it move out. Right? And then we say, well, boy, there's IT now. Look at all the IT projects we have. And we said, well, geez, every time I do a marketing campaign, that's a project, it's temporary. Well, I work in healthcare. Every time we have to comply with a new law, a new regulation, right? Oh, Sarbanes-Oxley, SOX. Let's talk about electronic patient records. All of those things are projects. Okay, so every time we're adding something new, changing something, anything that's temporary, anything that's unique, that is considered a project. And so this is why I make the joke, you know, who here does projects? Because guess what? We all do. And if your organization is not doing projects, what are they doing? Dying. Exactly. We have to change and we have to innovate. I use the acronym ACID, A-C-I-D, to describe project management today in 2018. Agility, change, innovation, and disruption. ACID is the name of the game for businesses to stay competitive. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, doesn't matter what field you're in, if you're not agile, if you're not adapting to change, if you're not innovating, and if you're not disrupting, you're dying. Okay? Projects used to be kind of a big thing. We thought about it as a big endeavor. It's a way of life now, okay? And that's why project management is the lifeblood for organizations, and if they're not paying attention to it, they're spending a lot of time and a lot of money and not getting any fruits of their labor, right? So we want to make sure that we're doing it efficiently. So I elaborate on this definition of project management to say it also involves managing our project constraints, which we're going to talk about a lot, and minimizing change during the project in order to achieve our project objectives. Okay, so we want to manage those constraints, those limitations placed upon our project, minimize change, because as we start to go into a project, the later in a project we go where we implement change or introduce change, the more damaging it is, in order to achieve whatever those objectives are. PMI every year, they put out a kind of like a State of the Union address. Right? They call it the pulse of the profession. And one big thing that's coming up is it's no longer about did we deliver on time, on budget, with what they asked. It's did we deliver business value? Did we deliver business value? How much did it cost for us to do it? And did we get a return on it? So we're going to talk about that in terms of the constraints in a little bit. So this is our definition. Now, the reason this is important for those 45% who said, hey, I might be interested in a certification, if you can apply this definition to work that you do, that means you're a project manager. Whether you have that title, whether you know you are or not, that means you might be eligible to pursue project management professional certification, and if not, at the very least, being able to get your certified associate in project management, your CAPM. Okay. So that definition is important. Now, as things have evolved, the way we do projects have evolved as well. So we're going to talk about some different approaches. The first one is what we call a predictive or a plan-driven approach to project management. It's exactly what it sounds like it is. It means we know what we're going to do. We plan the work and work the plan. You've ever heard that phrase? Project managers love to use that, especially old school project managers like me. Plan your work and work your plan. My trip to Arizona was a predictive project. I knew where I was going. I knew how much money I had. I knew how long I had to get there. Maybe didn't account for some risk along the way. I did get lost in Indiana in the cornfields. That was a little traumatic for me and the girls. It was a little stressful going through all the, it's like July, it was June 30th when I left. And so the cornfields were pretty big and tall. They were taller than my car, and I'm like, I'm trying to stay calm for my girls. No, we're fine. We're just doing a tour. This is Indiana. It's lots of corn. I think I had just seen like Children of the Corn, like it was like, I'm trying not to be completely and totally terrified. So plan-driven projects, we plan the work, we work the plan. My sister, my older sister, she's 4 years older than me. She moved out here, she followed me out here. So ironically, I moved to Arizona to kind of get away from my family a little bit, because again, in Maine, everybody knows everybody. They all followed me. Every single one of them are out here now. So she comes out a couple of years after I got out here, and she's a construction foreman, construction superintendent. And so she does predictive projects. She knows her trades, she knows her dependencies, she knows what she's got to get done, how long things take, how much things cost, where does she need to get her subs from. Right? Well, we have a high volatility within our environments nowadays. There's change coming at us from every direction. That could be technological change, it could be legal change, regulatory change, market change, right? I do a lot of projects internationally. I'm dealing with issues with tariffs, right? Because of the tariffs that have gone on. So government implications, right? Which has made us step away in a lot of situations from that predictive or plan-driven approach to more of an iterative or incremental. Okay, and what we say in an iterative or incremental approach to project management is sometimes we don't know what we don't know. Sometimes we have to get started and then kind of figure things out as we move through it. Okay, it's not for lack of planning, it's not for a bad project manager, it just means there's some discovery that needs to happen. So we're seeing more companies embrace this iterative or incremental approach where we're adding detail as we move through the project, as we're learning more. And then the newest kid on the block, although they've been around for quite a while, is an adaptive approach to project management. Has anyone ever heard of or been involved in an agile project? Scrum, if you've ever heard the term Scrum, okay, I've got one person. Okay, Scrum, XP, Lean, Kanban, if you've ever heard of a Kanban board. Okay, perfect. So what agile is it's a rebound effect. Now, most of you are younger than me. Some of you look like you might be within my age bracket a little bit. We had this big event that happened, about 18 years and 2 months ago. It was called Y2K. I worked for Global Financial Technologies for American Express. And so for those of you who were a little bit younger at the time, just the little quick lesson on Y2K was that when they set up all of our systems, our mainframes, and all of our computer programs, they did a 2-digit year field, which seemed great in the 80s. But then when it came to being the year 2000, guess what? We weren't going to be the year 2000, we were going to go back to 1900. Okay, so again, picture I'm in Global Financial Technologies for American Express, meaning worldwide, people's financial holdings, their travel, all of that are relying on our systems. If we blow up, shut down, or whatever, has a pretty major impact, right? So during Y2K, we realized, wow, we goofed up in IT. We really goofed up. So what happened was there was a backlash, and you might have seen this type of thing happen in your organization when your organization goofs up, and then they go like full bore gusto to make sure it never happens again. So they kind of do overkill on the remedy. Well, that's what happened with Y2K is we went from, okay, yeah, we kind of have this loosey-goosey way of programming to, oh, we have to document everything. We have strict procedures. We have methodologies. We have documents that track our documents. We have documents that track our documents that track our documents. People were like, why are we doing all of this documentation? That's where Agile came in, because a bunch of software developers said, you know what, there's got to be a better way. We need to be able to adapt and we need to be able to move quickly so that we can deliver a good quality product. So it took PMI a little while to get on the Agile train because they felt like it was a little bit in the face of traditional project management, that predictive project management. But now we're seeing a lot of industries using Agile outside of just software development. So if you ever get the chance to be involved in an Agile project, highly recommend it. We actually use Agile at our company a lot. And it allows for change because we do a small piece of functionality or release at a time. We get good feedback on it, and then we move to the next piece, right? And then we move like that, right? So there are different approaches to understand. So I want you to be considering your environment. How do you do project management? Is it predictive? Is it what I call intuitive project management, which is just like, okay, I've got all these balls in the air and I know I've got to talk to this person and that person and handle this? Is it iterative? Are you doing some type of an agile approach where you're getting small pieces of releases, small functionality out there at a time? So be thinking about that within your landscape. And again, different life cycles, different environments. Right, general project life cycle. So again, this could be a project that's a 3-month project. This could be a project that's a 10-year project. We essentially go through these same phases. So again, I want you to be putting this into context of your environment, the types of initiatives you may be involved in. We always start off with some type of plan, even in Agile projects. What are we trying to do? Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? We have to have that plan up front. We have to have the point, the purpose, the goal, the objective. What are we trying to accomplish with this? We develop whatever that is, create that product, service, result, that update. We always want to make sure that we're testing it, we're integrating it, we're validating it. Is it good quality? Is it going to make sense? Does it work? Maybe go through some type of training process with those users who may be impacted. We launch it, we either implement it, or it goes into production. And then very important over here on the closure side, you'll notice that we always want to close our loop on any project with some type of lessons learned. Here's the problem with lessons learned. Huge, valuable tool. However, in a lot of project environments, what they do is they wait to the end of the project. So picture this as a 2-year project. And you guys are all my team. And I say to you, hey, so what were those lessons that you learned during this project? Do you care anymore what the lessons were you learned during my project? That was 2 years long. All you care about is I'm done with that project, right? So trying to capture them at the end, and then we get this funny thing that happens, these rose-colored glasses at the end too. We're like, oh yeah, that was a good project. That went well. No, there's always something. You always underestimate your gas mileage, right? You always do, right? So we want to be capturing those lessons learned throughout our project. So the way I do it is I give my team members little notebooks. I try to give them something that's super crazy that they won't get lost and mixed up with anything else, like a Trolls notebook. You know, I like to give my big burly construction guys a Trolls notebook or a Hello Kitty notebook and be like, hey, do me a favor, buddy, carry this around with you. Every time something strikes you as, wow, that was a cool thing I just learned, make a note. Then I do a competition with those. And I have them submitted. Every month we do a drawing. We see who has the best lesson learned that month. And I give them like a dinner out at Red Lobster or something. Great, because I've improved the business. I've put a change in that's going to make sense. And I've let that team member know that their feedback matters. They love it. And if it's a competition, people love competitions. Right? Dangle a little something out there for them, but be capturing those lessons learned as you go. But obviously at the end, do some type of post-mortem, some type of lessons learned review, a final project report. Y'all know the definition of insanity, right? Repeat the same action, expect a different outcome. How many of you would say that your project management within your organization is slightly insane? Anybody? Do you repeat the same actions, think something different's going to happen, but you don't make any changes? Most organizations, I see a few, like, I'm not going to admit this. There's a camera back there. Yeah, most organizations will do the same thing over and over again. They can't figure out, well, why aren't we getting better at this stuff? Why do we have the same issues happening over and over? We're not fixing them. We need to change the actions. That's where those lessons learned come in. Right? Another thing that happens, especially in your role, you may see this or experience this, is we kind of get through here and we're done with whatever that thing was, that project was, and then we just kind of taper off. It just kind of goes away. We don't close the loop on our projects, okay? And that's where that incredible organizational learning happens. We want to make sure we're closing the loop on our projects, making sure we're getting that good data, that good information about what happened. All right, so now, this is where you guys get to share with each other, and then I'm going to pick on a few of you. I want you to, with your table groups, share a project that you've been involved with. You don't have to have any type of lead role in it, just something where you were some type of a participant in it. What went well, what didn't go so well, and what was your big takeaway? All right, so I'm going to give you just a couple minutes. So you're going to have to keep your conversation somewhat brief, but take a few minutes, share with your table something you were involved with within your current organization. What went well, what didn't go so well, and what was a big takeaway for you? Excellent. All right, good. Getting those end users involved. A good case study, again, I'm a project management geek, but a great case study on that and end user involvement and stakeholder identification is the Hoover Bypass Dam bridge. When they did that project, they did, I want to say it was almost a 2-year stakeholder identification process, and they not only looked at obviously tribal lands, government lands, traffic patterns. They had wildlife biologists come in. They were looking at migratory patterns of animals and everything, and because of that, that project went very, very well. They did the work up front to identify all those interested parties and really do a good job of having that big sweeping view. I was in Hawaii recently, and not during the hurricane. I actually got back right after the hurricane. But I was teaching a class on Pearl Harbor, and they were talking about they're putting in on Oahu like a metro system, like a metro. But the problem is that they actually didn't engage with the end users of the metro, and people don't want to use it. And it's over budget, it's behind schedule, and there's not anticipated the return's not there. People don't want to hop on the metro in Honolulu and Waikiki. They don't. So the local people are very much against it. And it was very interesting to see how much money the government is spending, the state is spending on something. Again, they didn't do a good job with that, understanding the end user population. Good. All right. All right, so why does good project management matter? All right, why does it matter? Well, a couple of things. Number one, innovation, right? We have to innovate in order to stay competitive nowadays. Again, doesn't matter your industry. Doesn't matter what it is you do. I'm in the, obviously, learning and consulting industry. I'm constantly looking at ways to innovate. What's a different way I can provide information to people to help them learn? Efficiency. It's amazing to me how inefficient a lot of our organizations are. Work and rework, right? All kinds of meetings to discuss other meetings. We revisit decisions we made 4 times that we've talked about that same decision, right? Inefficiency, again, I'm from Maine. It's like get stuff done, right? It's all about efficiency when you own your own business. And so that inefficiency is there. So that's why project management is so important. We want to make things better. We want to make things better for our employees. We want to make things better for our shareholders. If we're a public company, we want to make things better for our customers, our end users. We want to stay competitive. And again, it doesn't matter what field you're in, if you don't have that visual of, okay, how do I stay one step ahead? Guess what? You're going to get trampled on very, very quickly. Growth. We have to grow. We have to change. We have to innovate. All right. And so what happens when the projects don't go well? I think this is a picture of me a few years ago. Projects that don't go well. We talked about a few things already. Not involving the end users not bought in, not using the end product, wasted resources. There is a myth out there, again, kind of interesting to see if you have all experienced this. There's a myth out there that once we start a project and we start investing in it, that we can't cancel it. Well, I've already spent the money, we've already spent X amount. If we cancel it now, we're wasting all that money in that time. So what do? We're just going to keep throwing more money at it, right? And so at a point, we want to know where we call them kill points. brutal, but that's exactly what they are. They're kill points in your organization. Be thinking about that, especially if you have longer projects. Do you have built-in kill points to say, okay, you know what, we're not going to get the value that we anticipated. Okay, we want to be checking that. Again, that term strategic partner came up today in that panel. If you're looking for the best interests of your organization, part of that is looking around and saying, okay, what are we spending our time and our money on? And where do we say, you know what, enough's enough. This project is not going to give us the value that we need. And again, being able to have that voice to say that. Another big thing with executives, when you have projects that don't go well, especially projects that they have sponsored, is now we start to get an erosion of trust, right? We had a particular executive vice president, one of the organizations I worked with, and she put her name on a couple of projects, and let's say they were dismal failures. And after a while, it started to erode that trust that the organization had in her. And it wasn't only from the bottom up, it was the top down as well. Now, there were a lot of environmental considerations, things that occurred that made those dismal failures. It wasn't like she was just a Fruit Loop. There were things that happened, but it eroded the trust. So again, good project management done well builds that trust. Do we launch? All right, so here's what our project's going to be today. We're going to plan a vacation. Now, is the young lady in the room who went to Hawaii and had to extend? Okay, so you were there right after me, right? Because was it just recently? Yep, okay, you were literally there right after me. I was there in July, so when it hit. Okay, so here's what we're going to try to do. If you pull out your smartphone and you go to pin.umu.com and enter that code there, 320-71277. I should have made it shorter. I want you to put your name in and a destination. If we had to go on a vacation today, if I said to you all, okay, lovely ladies, we're heading out. We're going on a girls' trip. What's that destination you'd all want to go to? Go ahead and plug a destination in there. And I'm going to try to pull up our results over here. Oh. All right, let's see. Jessica, where's Jessica? Jessica, what destination did you pick? What one? Italy. All right, well, we are going to not do that one now. All right, Italy. So we are going to Italy. So it's funny that you bring that up because my best friend and I are going to Italy on a girls' trip this summer, so this next summer. So we're going to use our Italian vacation as our project. Now, how many of you have traveled internationally? All right, good portion, good portion. What's the first thing you think of when you need to travel internationally? Passports, excellent. You got to have your passport, right? I mentioned that my beautiful daughter and I decided to do a mother, daughter, granddaughter trip this past spring to Ireland, right? And I'm like, I've traveled internationally all the time. I speak, I teach, I go all over the world. What was it, maybe 10 days before our trip, I went, boy, I better check that passport. It's been a little while. Sure enough, it was expiring when I was going to be over there. I'm a project manager. There is no excuse for this stuff, right? So we always want to think about the passport. I was able to, obviously, get my new passport expedited. But we think about our passport. What's another thing that we think about when we're going to go on an international vacation?
If you need a visa.
Visa? Yeah. Visa, definitely. Yep. Oh, immunizations, right? I spent 6 weeks in India. For work. It was the most amazing trip I've ever had in my life. And let me tell you, I had lots of shots. There were a lot of things that weren't necessarily needed, but boy, I'm like, just give whatever I need because I can't get sick over there, right? All right, what else do we think about when we're going to plan an international vacation?
Political climate.
Oh, political climate, right? Again, not something that necessarily we thought about as much years ago, unless you were going to, potentially a Cold War country during that time. But really, other than that, nowadays it is a big consideration, right? I have to turn down a lot of jobs because I don't feel comfortable traveling alone as a female to some countries anymore. So it actually has changed my business model significantly. All right, good. Okay, so we're going to use all of those things you mentioned to go through our triple constraint here. So the first thing we know what we're doing, right, that we call that our scope. So the first aspect of triple constraint is scope. It is the first aspect we need to consider because if we can't deliver on the scope, the rest of it doesn't matter. Okay, so what happens a lot of times is we have a vague idea of what our scope is, but we go, yeah, and we've got money, and we've got people, and we've got enough time. No, you got to go back to the scope. Your scope is always your foundation. Can you deliver on what it is this project is about? Can you deliver the work of the project? During Y2K, when I left American Express after that, we were trying to find programmers to do a lot of the renovation works after the fact. We couldn't find programmers anywhere. They were all busy. They were all booked up, right? We couldn't deliver the scope. So the very first question we want to ask on our triple constraint is, what is our scope? Can we even deliver it? Again, a lot of companies have a lot of big ideas. Doesn't necessarily mean we can bring it to fruition. Italy is somewhat reasonable, right? We can say, yeah, we can handle our scope with Italy. Second thing we want to figure out is how much time do we have? Like you found out when you were in Hawaii, right? Was the question, hey, I missed a few days of my trip because of a hurricane. Can I extend my stay? How flexible is this schedule? Now, if you're dealing with any type of regulatory projects, legal projects, things like that, sometimes that schedule is immovable, right? You have to deliver on a certain date. Right, so how much time do we have? So for our trip to Italy, how long do we want to say we're going to be in Italy? 2 weeks. I'm going to go with the 2 weeks. 10 days, 2 weeks, I'm going to go with 2 weeks. All right, 2 weeks. We're going to be in Italy for 2 weeks. All right, cost. That's the third aspect of our triple constraint. How much money do we have? Now, when we say money, it's not just money as in dollars, it's also money as in resources. One thing I want you to kind of take away from this section or from this session today is when we talk about projects and our involvement in projects, every minute a resource spends on a project is money. Okay, so if your people are doing something, if your executive is in a meeting, that's money. That's costing the company money. Okay, so every minute of a resource hours is considered cost to the project. I've been involved with projects that looked like they were going to be super cheap because we weren't paying any vendors or anything like that or buying any equipment, but my time commitment was huge. And so there was a cost, an opportunity cost to the organization. Now these constraints are related, these triple constraints are related in that if one changes, more than likely the other is going to be affected. So let's say we're going to go to Italy, we're going to go for 2 weeks. How much money do we have? $3,000. Okay, so we have $3,000 to go to Italy for 2 weeks. All right, now what if I say, you know what? Ladies, I love y'all. I think we need a really good girls. I don't know about you, this has been a tough year. I want to go for 3 weeks. I want to push that schedule. I want to stay there for 3 weeks. What does that do to our money? Makes it very tight, right? Now maybe we could do it because maybe we were going to stay in nice hotels and maybe we do like an Airbnb instead, right? Maybe we were going to go on a bunch of tours and instead of paying for tours, we're going to go ahead and just walk around and do self-guided tours and use a farmer's guide, right? Not a farmer's guide, a farmer's. My Maine came out there. All right, so this is the balance with the constraints. Now this happens all the time in practices that we're trying to balance these constraints because guaranteed somebody's going to say, I want a 3-week vacation, not a 2-week, right? Or they're going to say, I want to go to Italy, but I also want to go ahead and take a Mediterranean cruise. And while we're there, we might as well go ahead and stop by Greece. And how about Paris on the way back? I'm creating a great dream trip for all of us right now, aren't I? All right, and we're all going to be like, book that trip. So that's how those constraints are related. So again, your involvement in project management, I want you thinking about those 3 constraints that way. Anytime there's a change introduced, what is the impact on those other 2 constraints? We call this the triple constraint, but you might notice there's a 4th aspect, a 4th constraint, and it's quality. And when we talk about quality in project management, it's quality of the product, what we're delivering, but also quality of the project. How well did it go? Right? So I could go to Italy for 3 weeks on $3,000, but maybe it was just a rainy season, maybe there was some political unrest, maybe the hotels we were in were horrible, we were staying with your cousin Vinny over there because he could give us a deal, right? So the quality of the product wasn't there, even though the quality of the project was. Technically, I went for 3 weeks, I was in Italy, and I spent $3,000. So we want to look at quality from both sides. right? Are we having a quality project and a quality product? So we're going to break this down a little bit further. So scope, I'm going to just give you a couple of pieces here to be thinking about from your perspective on organizational project management. We said that scope is our foundation. It is the work of the project. What are we doing? Some of you that have been a little bit more involved in project management might recognize what this graphic is. It's called a work breakdown structure. This is a best practice. The reason it's a best practice is because I can look at it and figure out what's going on. Okay, if I write up this beautiful detailed scope statement and I write out our itinerary for Italy and here's where we're going and here's why we're going to go to this and here's the history of that and blah, 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 blah. People are going to be like, oh boy, yeah, okay. Give them a picture. We're going to go to the Colosseum and then we're going to go here and then we're going to go here, and they see the picture. People can get engaged with that. Okay, one thing to keep in mind when we're talking about scope is we're going to be very susceptible in most organizations to scope creep. Okay, scope creep is unmanaged changes to the project scope. That's where when we decide to go to Italy, we say, you know what, it's a girls' trip. Let's fly first class. I went to England. My first international trip was to England, and they flew us business class at the time. It was an experience back then. Like, they had this little cart they came around with, and it had ice cream, and it had Paul Newman toppings, and they came around and you made these sundaes right at your seat. And it was the most incredible, luxurious, it doesn't work like that anymore. You might as well sit and coach. It's just not there. So scope creep happens, so we want to be aware of that. This is one of your best protections against scope creep, is to have a work breakdown structure, a visual of what are we doing. What are the pieces of work that we're doing decomposed to a level where people can go, okay, here's the work of our project. If you don't have some type of a visual or some type of a document like that, that's where people start adding a bunch of stuff in. They just assume we're going to do all this other stuff. So pictures are always good. So scope creep are those unmanaged changes to the project scope. There's something else that happens, and actually, Anna, when you were telling your story about the SharePoint site, it's something called scope gap. And we're seeing this happen more and more. This might be a new phrase. You might not have heard this one before. We're seeing it happen more and more because of technology, and the rapid expansion of technology is that there are requirements we don't even know we need to know. There are things that happen and we're like, oh, whoops, we didn't know we needed this piece or that piece or whatever. You know, maybe I'm going to Italy and didn't realize I needed a passport. I mean, most of us do, but you never know, right? Oh, I didn't realize I needed travel insurance in case I got ill on this trip. And so my health insurance doesn't work over here, or something like that. That's scope gap. These are legitimate scope requirements that have defined or found later in your project. The problem with the scope gap is these are things we actually have to do. We have to deal with it. So guess what? If we're adding scope, again back to our triple constraint, what's that doing? It's potentially impacting our schedule, potentially impacting our cost. Right? So we want to try to identify that as much up front as we can. If you know that there's potential scope gap, you want to make sure that you have some contingency allocated to account for that. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. All right, the second constraint was schedule. How much time do we have? Couple of key things on this. I'm a big fan of keeping it simple. If you use Microsoft Project or one of these other types of software, PlanView, Primavera, Clarity, any of the bazillion ones that are out there now, but you're using it like a spreadsheet, use a spreadsheet. All right, you don't need the fancy tools to manage a project schedule. I have a lot of my clients that use whiteboards if they're co-located. Visual Kanban systems, you mentioned you familiar with Kanban, some type of a visual system works well. What is the minimum that you can use to display your information and make sure people understand what the schedule is about? The other things we want to consider in a schedule is what are our dependencies? Do we have any relationship dependencies we need to factor in? Are there things that have to happen before other things? Again, one of those phrases today was proactive, right? That future thinking. You guys are known for that. Being proactive, seeing what's going to happen downstream, right? That's where those dependencies come in. If you know there's implications there, start to build those buffers in, make that awareness known. All right, cost, like I said, there's cost for any type of resource hours. There could be what we consider direct cost. Maybe I'm hiring contractors. Maybe I'm purchasing equipment. There are also indirect costs. Maybe we're using a conference room twice a week and there's some type of billing associated with that. Maybe there is travel. One thing I would encourage you all to think about with costs from a project perspective is be able to understand the bigger picture of cost. And what I mean by that is a lot of times we just assume that, oh, the work just happens and we're just it's just paying for it or whatever. Start to put some type of a dollar value, and I don't care if it's $1 an hour or whatever you want to call it, but some type of a dollar value to the amount of hours you're spending on a project and the amount of hours your executive is spending on a project. Okay? And like I say, it doesn't matter what rate you want to use. You don't have to find out, well, what's the salary and divide it by this or anything like that. You can come up with a loaded resource rate, use that. But be thinking in terms for your organization, how much are we truly spending on projects? How much time are we really putting towards that? What are those indirect costs? All right? And that starts to make us a little bit more efficient. I always tell my team, think about your organization's money as if it was your own. Pretend you're writing the check for that project. Would it change the way you do things if you knew it was coming out of your pocket? And again, I was very blessed to be raised by a family that owned their own business. So to me, it was coming out of our pocket. And so I've always had that mentality with any of my customers, my clients, my employers. Right? How many resources are needed? Again, factor that in. All right, quality. We're going to talk about quality just a little bit here. Product quality, again, it's the degree to which it meets expectations. Now, here's the problem with quality. Let's see. Who likes McDonald's? Like when you think of like, I want a good burger. Who's like a McDonald's? Okay. So quality is subjective, right? So what you think is quality, somebody else might not. Mentioned about IT rolling out something without considering the end users, right? That's a product quality mismatch. Quality is subjective. It's just like beauty. What I think is absolutely beautiful, you might not think is beautiful. All right? So it's very important to us to understand how do they view quality, how do they define quality of this product, this result, this update. Does it meet expectations? Right? Project quality, again, is the degree to which we were able to deliver within those constraints. Was it on time? Was it on budget? Did we deliver what they asked for? Again, do you have a quality check in place at the end of your projects? The estimate is about 28% of projects are successful. Right? That's a big blended rate. About 28% are successful, meaning they were delivered within the time and the budget. So if you think about that, that's a lot of waste. Quality control and quality assurance, I'm going to touch on those a little bit. Everything that you do, and you all know this, right? Anything you're going to put out there, whether it's a report, it's an email, it's a memo, it's some type of presentation, what do you want to do before you have anybody see it? Proofread it, check it. Make sure the UMU works, right? Those little things, we did troubleshoot that, didn't work. You want to make sure we're doing some type of quality control on things. You want to check things internally before you're giving them to that customer, end user, or whatever, right? That's considered quality control. Quality assurance is considered quality improvement. That's where I mentioned the lessons learned earlier, that's where the lessons learned come into play. How do we get better? Okay, we can always improve, and that's what quality assurance is about. So again, looking at the processes. A good way to think of the difference between these two. Quality control is concerned with the product. Quality assurance is very concerned with the process. Are we getting better? Mm-hmm. Talked about being a valuable strategic partner to your organizations. Right? One of the best ways to do that is to be looking at ways you can improve quality. How do we get better? Right, so those are our triple constraint plus quality there. All right, so I want you to take a couple minutes. Actually, we're going to do this as a group activity. What constraint does your organization struggle with the most, and why? And what could you do? So think about that for a second. I'm going to ask for a volunteer to share with us what constraint does your organization struggle with? Scope, schedule, cost, or quality. Why, and what could be done to improve that? And do we have a microphone runner? All right. Who would like to share with about their organization? You know, and it is funny, you know, obviously anytime you have regulators, government, things like that, if you're in that type of industry, certainly big implications there. That's a scope issue, but it's also a quality issue, right? Making sure that you're delivering what you need to comply with any type of requirement. The other thing that you mentioned was that they could pop in at any time. So again, there's that proactive. Do we have what we need? Are we dotting our I's? Are we crossing our T's? Excellent. All right, so let's go beyond our triple constraint. So everybody at project management, scope, time, cost, throw in quality. Well, what else? And this is where we're seeing this big evolution in project management. So the next big thing is risk. Risk is uncertainty. Okay, I mentioned my story about going from Maine to Arizona. And what was my 2 risks that I did not account for? Number 1 was the gas mileage. What was the second one? Getting lost in the cornfields, right? And this was back before you could just go, okay, Google, navigate to Phoenix, right? And so we want to be always looking at that uncertainty. And this is something that, again, came up on the panel that you are all very skilled at and need to be very skilled at, is surveying for that uncertainty that's out there. Now, here's the interesting thing with risk. When we talk about project risk, it's defined as an uncertain event that, if it occurs, has an impact on our project, and that impact could be positive or negative. Typically, when we think of risk, we always think of negative risk, right? What are all the bad things, right? Oh, you know, the gas mileage, the cornfield, we go to Italy and I lose my passport, or the hotel got overbooked, we have no place to stay. These are all negative risks, we call those threats. Well, there's actually also something called positive risk, according to the Project Management Institute, and these are our opportunities. Where can we look for the benefits, right? What are the good things that can happen? For me, that 5 days in my car with my 3 daughters was a huge opportunity to spend quality time with my daughters. I don't think they'll ever forget it. I will never forget that trip. Our little cat we had with us wouldn't forget it either. She didn't really like that too much, but she might say that was a threat versus an opportunity. So be looking for those opportunities as well. Where can we capture those? Now, the risk process, this is going to be high level here. This is a 5-day class in and of itself, but just high level. How are you approaching risk management on your project? Maybe a high level risk management, maybe you're going more in depth. It depends. Again, if you're dealing with the FDA, you're going to have much more rigorous risk management approach than if you're doing some other types of projects. You want to identify the risk. The key is, and again it came up on the panel, is you are always in risk identification mode. That's as part of the role that you all play, is you're always looking for that uncertainty that's out there. Right? It's not a check the box type of thing. We're always looking for risks. We want to assess that or analyze that risk, and we can do it qualitatively and quantitatively. Qualitatively goes, yep, that's about a yellow risk. Quantitatively would be, yep, that's a 30-day delay and a $3,000 risk, right? So we can look at it both ways. We can look at it cost, schedule, impact, or we may just go low, medium, high, red, yellow, green, allowing us to prioritize. We figure out what those risk responses are going to be. What are we going to take? What actions can we take to mitigate that risk, avoid that risk, exploit that risk? And then we control risk throughout our project. The more risk you have on a project, the more uncertainty you have on a project, the more contingency time and money you should have. They should always correlate. So if you're going into a project that's new to you, unknown, a lot of unknowns, you would anticipate that you would have more contingency there, that you could, in case something happens, because it will. Your gas mileage will be lower. You get lost in a cornfield, right? We want to make sure we have that contingency available. Right, another key one, and this again came up today, was stakeholders. Stakeholders would be anybody involved in your project, anybody involved in or affected by your project. And I always live by the old mantra: keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. Okay? In any organization, people do not like change. And yet, most of what we do every day is manage change, right? I want to know who those people are that are the most resistant to that change, because they're the ones I want to get the closest to, because those are the ones who are going to mess up my project, right? So you want to figure out, okay, who's in my corner, who's a supporter, and who's a resistor. And I want to get uncomfortable, and I want to get close to the people who don't like my project and don't want it to succeed. Right? Now, there's different tools you can use to assess your stakeholders. I like this just from a high-level perspective. I look at power and I look at interest. Power means the ability to make change. If they have low power and they have low interest, they don't really care and they can't do anything, well, guess what? I'm not doing a whole lot with them. I'm going to monitor them. If they have low power, they can't make change, but they have high interest or concern, could be positive or negative, I want to keep them informed. Now, here's a mistake a lot of people make in projects. They go, you know what? They can't make change on my project. Why do I care about them? Why would I waste my time with these guys? Because these guys report to these guys. I want to make sure I'm keeping them informed, keeping them in a position where they're not going to be escalating things. So you want to figure out who are those people that are out there that could potentially be your ripple makers, right? And you want to be proactive with them. Now, if they have high power, low interest, awesome. That's exactly where I want them to be. Keep them satisfied. Because as soon as they move over to this high power, high interest, or high concern, those are the people who can make change. Those are the people that can at any point introduce problems to my project. Now, your sponsor, the person who's involved with chartering your project, obviously they're going to be in that quadrant, but they're a supporter. So I would want to look for the people who are the resistors. Who wants my project to fail? I want to make sure I identify them explicitly. Okay, and get uncomfortable. Another one you can use is what we call salience model, looking at power, urgency, and legitimacy. Do they even have a legitimate right to be involved in the project? Depending on your organization, you might have those people who just feel like they need to get involved. I have a situation right now with one of the organizations I'm involved with. There's a particular member who's like wanting to insert into everything that's going on, even though it doesn't impact her or her area. And that would be a legitimacy issue. Right? So we want to know who they are. You want to understand the politics of your organization. Every organization has politics, explicit and implicit politics. Who are the people that hold power? And power has nothing to do with title. So you want to know who your playmakers are. Who are those people that get things done? I would imagine many of you sitting in this room would be considered playmakers for your organization. The people who know how to navigate those political waters and get things done. Always have a good stakeholder register. Document who those stakeholders are, what their role is in the project, what their involvement is. Making sure, again, that you're managing their expectations very well. All right, communication. That was the other big takeaway today from the panel discussion. Right, 2 words that were used together. And interestingly, I had this on my slide that I'd already prepared before I heard the panel discussion. So again, worked perfectly. Communication and trust. We're talking about access to email boxes, right? Trust comes through communication. If you don't know me, and I'm going to go get up in your business and be like, hey, you need to do this, and hey, when am I getting that? You don't know me. You don't trust me, right? That's normal. So we want to develop our relationships, and the way we develop our relationships and projects is through communication. And there's a very fine line with communication of too much and not enough. The goal is to hit that middle line, and the big thing is consistency. If one week I'm sending you 15 emails that are multiple paragraphs long, and then the next week I might just be like, yep, here's one email with like 1 sentence, and then 3 weeks go by and you don't hear from me, you're like, what? Who is she and what is she doing? So consistency is incredibly important. The more consistent you are with your behavior and your communication, the more trust that they're going to have because they know what to expect from you. It's all about managing expectations. Again, I am imagining you are all very adept at that because of the role that you're in. You have to manage those expectations. I didn't see anyone who is a big fan of McDonald's, right? There is something that McDonald's does well. Right, their fries are so good, like the super addictive chemicals. I don't know what they dunk those fries in. Salt, just lots of salt and good lard or something. I don't know, but their fries. But other than fries, do you know what they're really good at? They're good at efficiency. They're excellent at efficiency, and they're also very good at managing expectations globally. If you go to a McDonald's anywhere in the world, you're going to have a pretty similar experience. Although, I have to say, there was one in Stuttgart, Germany that had the best burger I've probably ever had. I have no idea why. I had that look. I'm like, oh, this is really good. I was like, doing one of these. I'm like, this is the best burger I've ever had, and it's McDonald's. They're very good at managing expectations. You know what you're going to get. Maybe your order's right, maybe it's not. It's going to be lukewarm. It's going to be somewhat edible, and you're going to have the super psychoaddictive fries, right? They're very consistent with that. That's the big piece of project management. Seamless project management is managing expectations by being consistent, right? Making sure people understand. People are always going to want the Mercedes when you have a budget that's going to give you a tricycle. Right? So if they're thinking they're getting the Mercedes and you're going to be delivering them a tricycle, guess what? They're not going to be happy. Product quality is not going to be there. So if you know they're getting the tricycle, tell them right from the beginning, you're getting a tricycle, not a Mercedes. Again, McDonald's is very good about that. Standard status reporting, make sure you have standard templates. A lot of you are in a position where you can influence your organization. The more consistent your templates are, the more efficient you are, and again, people know where to go to get the information. So that's a big one. We talk about repository. I call it a repository of goodness, right? Where do you archive those things, those records, those lessons learned, those project files, right? We want to learn from the past. We want to have a good repository. We want consistency in our documentation. Having those templates is key. I want to introduce a couple concepts here with communication to you. The first one is daily stand-ups. Now, this is something I completely and totally stole from Agile Project Management, and I use it a lot. How many of you don't have enough meetings on your calendar or your executive's calendar? Right, and again, I would go into the office at like 6 a.m. so that I could work from 6 to 8, because then I had meetings from 8 to 5, and then I would stay from 5 to 7 to do my work again, right? That was my pocket of work because it was meetings all day. Well, in Agile, what they said is, you know what, we spend way too much time in meetings, so how do we make it more efficient? And they do something called the daily stand-up. Beautiful, beautiful invention. What we do is we say, all right, well, let's see. You guys are my project team. I stand up. Now, I'm mean. So the way I do it is I actually make my team hold a ream of paper while they talk. And they say, hi, I'm Belinda. Yesterday, I completed task 1, 2, and 3. Today, I'm going to be working on task 4 and 5. My impediment today is that I need approval on that PO that I submitted so I can get the contractor going. Nice and quick. What I did yesterday, what I'm doing today, and do I have a problem? And then I hand the ream of paper to my teammate. And she stands up and she tells us what I did yesterday, what she's doing today, and what she needs help with. Now I can say, boy, Kathleen, when she did her stand-up, she has an issue that's similar to mine. Kathleen, let's you and I go have a chat about that. All right, so we didn't have to involve the rest of the team in the troubleshooting because it's really something that just involves Kathleen and I. All right, so instead of sitting there for an hour, we handled a stand-up meeting in 15 minutes, no more. All right. What is the most productive day of the week for most projects? What would you guess? Monday, Tuesday. Any other guesses? Thursday? Friday. Why do you say Thursday?
Monday's kind of like, what went on over the weekend. Tuesday's catching up on Monday's project. Wednesday's kind of up in the air, what's coming in, what should be accomplished. Thursday's the best day.
Thursday's the best day. Psychologically, Thursday is typically the best day because status reports are due on Friday. So we all suffer from something called student syndrome, which means we're going to put off to the very last minute our work. And so what happens in normal human behavior, normal human psychology, is we put off to the last minute the work that we need to do. And so if we're not reporting status till Friday, guess when we do our work? Thursday. When you do a daily stand-up, you're doing work. You're reporting your status every single day. Productivity is much higher. So think about that. Think about ways to incorporate that. But when you're getting that constant status like that, a lot of you mentioned like doing your one-on-ones once a week. Think about quick hits, quick meetings like that. That's one of the best savings that you have on your schedule. All right, I'm going to do a couple more things, then I'm going to turn it over for some Q&A. Leadership, simple message here on leadership is everything that you do. Every word, every action, every facial expression, every piece of your body language is in the role of a leader. Because a leader just means you're simply impacting people around you. Okay, I heard today we talked about on the panel the problems, right? When this disaster happened or this big thing happened and how did we handle that? The ultimate goal in leadership is to stay in control and to stay calm and to portray confidence, even though you may be feeling like an absolute disaster inside, right? Is being able to say, okay, we've got this. We've got this as a team. We can get through this, but staying calm and being in touch with your emotions is key. But you are constantly in a leadership role, whether you want to consider yourself a leader or not. Everything that you do, every word. Emotional intelligence is, I'm very passionate about it. I don't have time to go into a ton of detail on this. I would love to talk to anybody after if you have questions on this, certainly. I would encourage you, if you have not taken an emotional intelligence class, I would highly, highly, highly recommend it. I can't say that enough. I literally had to have an emotional intelligence intervention done on me because I was not emotionally intelligent. I was very emotionally unintelligent. And I had an intervention where they literally sent me away for a couple weeks, my organization did, and it changed my life. So I'm a big, big believer in EI. The first step is admitting we have a problem, right? Self-awareness. Then it goes into self-management. Once I know what my triggers are, my behaviors, can I manage myself? And then it's about social awareness. How are the other people around me feeling, thinking, acting? What is my impact on them? And then how do I manage that relationship because of it? Okay, having empathy and understanding that people have struggles we do not know about. We see so little of people and we make so many judgments of things, and it's really what's below the surface there. So as support folks, as executive assistants, as any type of role in project management, emotional intelligence is key. Right? Being able to navigate those waters. So we go back to our trip to Italy. Here we are. Here's our trip to Italy. What are your triggers? Right? Think about that within your organization. What are those triggers? What are those things that push your hot buttons that you know really bother you? Okay? I can tell you I have a couple. One is left-hand lane drivers. I'm from the Northeast where you drive on the right, you pass on the left. So if somebody's in the left-hand lane going slower than traffic or slower than I am, oh boy. But I know it's a trigger. Right? So I recognize that that's a trigger. If someone talks to me like I'm stupid, I don't know if you've ever experienced that, when someone talks down to you like you're dumb, that's like a big one for me. Don't talk to me like I'm dumb. Yeah, I might miss the point sometimes, but I'm not dumb, right? So know what your triggers are. I travel all the time, so I have learned to really identify my triggers and manage them well, most of the time. All right, so a couple of things to wrap up, and then we're going to do Q&A. 2 certifications from a project management perspective. Project management professionals, the PMP. That's if you have experience managing projects. I would guarantee you probably all do, whether you think you do or not. If you don't feel like you have experience managing projects, there is what's called the Certified Associate in Project Management, which is intended for people that are newer to project management. Both certifications are very, very, very highly regarded within the industry. I recommend them for everyone. I'm doing a presentation for Meeting Planners International in a few weeks. Meeting planners are project managers. Executive assistants are project managers. All right, so be thinking about that. If you have questions on certification, certainly come talk to us. I hold the PMP and CAPM. Brandy recently got her CAPM, her Certified Associate. We're happy to talk to you about the value and whether it would make sense within your role to get one of those certificates. Okay. All right, if you have any follow-up questions, our information's back there at the back, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you for having me.